3, 2, 1.
Good morning and welcome to the 2020 Vision Zero Leadership Summit. So pleased to have you join us. I'm Hillsborough County Commissioner Pat Kemp, and I am Hillsborough MPO Policy Chair. We'll start off this morning with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
for which
it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you to everyone. And we'll start by acknowledging the MPO board members. Ms. Wilkening, if you could do so, thank you.
Sure. The MPO board members in attendance: Commissioner Kemp, Commissioner Smith, Commissioner Overman, Councilman Citro, Gina Evans, Melanie Williams, Joe Wagner, and Adam Harden.
Great, thank you so much. And I want to welcome everyone this morning, and I want to give a really big thank you to our staff, and particularly Beth Alden, our Executive Director of the MPO. This is I think, an exciting conference to be part of in this summit, and thank you so much for doing such great work in putting this together. Everyone, I think, will learn so much this morning. Thanks so much to the speakers and the audience for attending. And I'd like to begin now by introducing the way we're going to set this up. The summit includes 3 panels, each with a moderator and 3 panelists. The moderator will give a presentation followed by short statements from each of the panelists, and then the moderator questions. If time permits, audience questions will be addressed. The audience is urged to type questions into the chat box. And if time precludes addressing these questions during the meeting, the staff will follow up afterwards. At the end of today's summit, there is a time set aside for board member discussion. There will be time for us to consider our next steps and how various agencies and governments might work together. And we'll start first with Beth Alden, Hillsborough MPO, to talk about the purpose of today's meeting.
Thank you so much. And we have a really great lineup of speakers for you today, and many thanks to Gina Torres for pulling all of this together. The reason why this summit is happening today is because of our board members championing the cause of safety. Every year, metropolitan planning organizations are required to look at our crash statistics all over the country. And we continue to have very high rates of fatalities and severe crashes. On average, kind of ballpark, we're around 200 fatal crashes a year and around 1,600 crashes with incapacitating injuries, which is just an amazing toll on our community every year. When our board took a look at our numbers for 2019, we were actually at 226 deaths, and there was a lot of concern about our not being able to make progress on turning our numbers around. Of course, the Metropolitan Planning Organization, our bread and butter is roadway improvements, roadway enhancements, and we have a number of great projects that are coming up that are funded with federal grants that this MPO has prioritized. But it is because of the limitations of federal grants, there's only a certain amount of money. There's limited progress that we can make. Funding, of course, was set aside in the transportation sales surtax, specifically for safety improvements, and the improvements that would be built in the first year have already been identified by all of the local governments. That funding is sitting in escrow accounts at this point, awaiting a decision from the Florida Supreme Court about whether we can move forward with use of that sales tax revenue. So you all very rightly, the board very rightly expressed, is there anything else that we can do while we are waiting to see if we can move forward with those safety improvements? Are there any policy decisions that we can make in the near term that will help us make progress towards zero? And some of the topics that you all asked questions about were about land use and development. How do we make sure that as new development happens, that we're not creating new safety problems? How can traffic enforcement help to encourage safer behaviors, especially looking at those most severe crashes and what kinds of behaviors contribute to those severe crashes? And finally, how are we communicating about safety with all of the members of our public, all of our citizens, so that we can work together and hopefully all be champions for safety? And so that's how this summit came to be. And, you know, again, we're just very pleased with the folks who agreed to participate this morning. So thank you to all of our speakers and panelists.
Thank you so much, Beth Alden of the Hillsborough MPO. We'll go next for a Vision Zero overview. And I'm so proud of our MPO for the work that we've done on Vision Zero. Gina Torres of the Hillsborough MPO. Gina.
Thank you, Commissioner. Well, I thought what better way to highlight where we've come with our Vision Zero program than to just scroll through the recently completed 2-year report. The Vision Zero Action Plan doesn't even just feel like an MPO plan anymore. It really belongs to all of our partners, public and private, and neighborhood groups who have they're all doing their part to eliminate injuries and deaths on our roads. Beth, that's perfect location there. Just a few highlights of what we've accomplished. We've had 4 walks of silence to honor victims and survivors of traffic violence, and over 50 intersections with new leading pedestrian intervals, and over 100 with lighting upgrades. And I think we're nearing like 20 painted intersection murals, over a dozen complete street projects. And we now have 700 Facebook followers, and the DOT has awarded almost $600,000 towards high visibility enforcement on the high injury networks. Beth, if you can move to the next couple of pages. We're proud to report some major accomplishments and achievements. The City of Tampa is committed to becoming a Vision Zero city. DOT completed the first separated cycle track on a highway system right here in Tampa on Jackson Street. The county is moving forward with corridor preservation plan, context classification of their roads, and an update to the design manual with an evaluation of speed limit setting practices. So if we scroll through the next couple of pages, unfortunately, we do see that we continue to experience some of the highest traffic fatalities in the country, and it's disconcerting, as Beth said, to have to report any number over 0 as our yearly safety targets. But we've learned a lot, and you can continue to scroll back to next couple of pages. But we've embraced the safe systems approach, that all elements of the system must be strengthened. The next page, Beth. Safe people and roads and vehicles. We acknowledge that our roads need to be designed to make it difficult to speed, and outreach to motorists needs to happen. That slowing down doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be delayed by any extended amount of time, but it does mean that maybe everyone can arrive alive to their destination. And there's been a shift on the next page, Beth, of supporting roundabouts more than ever before, and prioritizing funding for designs that make it comfortable to walk and bicycle even alongside vehicular traffic. And creating this kind of safe environment doesn't have to break the bank either. So on the next couple of pages, Ian, who you'll hear from soon, said something yesterday along the lines of, I think if we think our work is finished, we're missing something. It was something like that. And so the MPO will continue we've adopted a health and all policies resolution last year, and that recognizes the link between having healthy community members and providing safe places to walk and bike and move around without a vehicle necessarily. We've also focused much of 2020 on prioritizing the high injury network, where speed related crashes were most concerning. And we've developed an action plan that will lead to safer streets. We're now working on an equity plan, and we continuously try to find ways to improve our outreach techniques. But lastly, what's next? You know, the pandemic offered some interesting opportunities to reshape our public realm from being car-centric, and we're looking at, you know, active transportation, shared mobility. We're exploring more in those areas. And everyone at the summit today can play a role in advancing Vision Zero through their professional work, which we'll highlight today, but also in our personal lives by choosing to walk, bike, or take transit, by slowing down and putting our phones down when we're driving. We can support funding for safe streets. And if I can end with one of my favorite pictures, which is actually on the next page, is the start of the appendix, we can get involved with events like the March on Martin Luther King Parade. That is my grandson in the front of that. I kind of try to work him in. But really, let's get started with the summit, and I can give it back to Commissioner Kemp, and we can get going.
Thank you so much. I just feel like there's just been a sea change from decades preceding this. So this is just an exciting time for us to be in. And our next panel will be on land use and design. And since safe communities, they just don't happen by accident. How do we avoid making decisions now that don't require costly fixes later? And we're going to have Ian Lockwood, livable transportation engineer with Tool Design Group. He's going to head the panel. And Ian, I'm so glad. I know I'm meeting you by Zoom here, but for me, your reputation precedes you by several years. So will be locked into your words this morning. Ian collaborates with property owners, agency officials, and the community to improve the public realm to reflect the community's values and advance their vision. So with that, we also have panelists, Melissa Zornita, Executive Director of the Planning Commission, Lucia Garces, Deputy County Administrator, Hillsborough County Government, and Mike Callahan, Planning and Design Coordinator of the City of Tampa. Thank you all.
Ian, did we lose you?
He is calling in from Canada, so he was having a little issues earlier, and I'm sure he's frantically trying to get back on.
It does show his drop connection.
I think I'm back.
We can hear you, Ian.
Am I on? I'm sorry, my internet keeps coming in and out.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so thank you all for attending. I'm going to give a short presentation on introducing Vision Zero. So next slide, please. So Vision Zero started in Sweden, and it had kind of three parts. Next slide. It was started in '97, and it was to change the design and functioning of streets so that very few people would get killed as a result of a collision. Next slide. This cartoon, I wish I had drawn it. So basically it says that crossing a street or using a street shouldn't be a death-defying experience. Next slide. And what they're trying to do is reduce the number of crashes to eventually get to zero. Next slide. And how they do it has got four pillars. One is ethics, where life and health are more important than typical traffic metrics like speed and V/C ratios and that kind of thing. It changes the responsibility. Like here in North America, we typically blame the users when there's a crash. We assign blame, and in Sweden, the agencies and engineers and so forth, they're also responsible for the crashes. And if we were to do that, I think crash rates would drop a lot. but we don't right now, but that's something I think we should work on. And safety, now this is something that we are working on in North America, and it assumes that people make mistakes and that those mistakes shouldn't be a death sentence. And lastly, the agencies, the engineers, the designers, the providers of the infrastructure and the users they're all in this together, and they need to do what they can to make things safer for everybody. And that change is required, and that all those different groups need to be willing to change. Next slide. So this graph is one that's familiar to all of us through different imagery, but it was prepared from research that was done in the early 80s. So we've known about the effects of speed on severity of crashes for at least 40 years. Next slide. We know that speed affects stopping distances, fields of view, and the probability of surviving crashes. And speed is probably the largest contributor to the danger on our streets. And so one of the key things is to not just reduce speeding, but to reduce design speeds and slow cities down, particularly arterials where the speeds are literally lethal. Next slide. So there's kind of three types of safety. There's statistical safety, perceived safety, or what we call comfort, and then there's what we call legal safety. And I'll go through these a little bit. Next slide. So statistical safety is what Vision Zero targets, and it tries to reduce the number of crashes, injuries, and particularly deaths. However, a lot of people don't know what the safety statistics are out on the road. And so their perceived safety governs the way they behave. So next slide. So this has to do with complete streets, where we want folks to walk and bike and so forth, but they won't if they're not comfortable. They don't know the safety statistics, but they know how they feel. They know if they're comfortable taking the bus or if they're comfortable walking or riding their bikes. And if they're not comfortable, they're not going to use it. And so complete streets is about comfortable accommodation of all the different user groups in the street. And increasingly so, and this is about land use, the streets ought to support the static use of the streets, the institutions, the homes, the retailing, the businesses, the recreational areas, and those sorts of uses on the sides. And we call those green groups and those red groups in that little cartoon the vulnerable users. And good street design supports those vulnerable users. Next slide. So there's a lot of work we can all do from the terms of the guidelines and practices and policies and comp plans and these sorts of things to help designers and providers actually design streets that are both safe and comfortable. Next slide. So conventionally, we work to cover ourselves from tort liability. So we just follow the guidelines and we say, well, we follow the standards and the guidelines, so we're free of liability. But we build routinely streets that are too fast, where we know people are going to be killed, and we need to change the policies and so forth. Next slide. So that we do have safe and comfortable streets. And that's, I think, a challenge to everybody on the call, is to stop building things where we know people are going to die and start building things where it's both safe and comfortable. Next slide. So when I started in this business 30 odd years ago, mobility was the movement of people and goods. And the assumption was farther, faster, and greater numbers meant progress. And we kind of just looked out the window on the street, and whatever was out there, we called it demand. And we just thought, well, we just got to accommodate that demand by building more of whatever we were doing. But we never questioned why certain modes weren't there, or why folks are traveling. We just, it was reactive type of exercise. And that definition of mobility is well obsolete, and we have much better definitions now. And here's one of them. Next slide. So mobility is the population's capabilities and strategies to move in order to access what they need to live within the city. And notice the populations has an S apostrophe. Next slide. So this means there's lots of different populations in the city, all of whom have mobility needs. Young people, old folks, people of different income levels, walkers, cyclists, and so on. And if we just look out the window what's out there, we may not see some of these user groups because they're not accommodated. So the idea is to design streets that can accommodate all these different populations. Next slide. The other thing that we didn't question 30 years ago was why people moved. People move for a purpose. They want to access something. And about 20% of our trip making has to do with going to work, and about 80% has to do with everything else, like going shopping, going to church, visiting your friends, and that kind of thing. So if we can mix our land uses and our densities, we can bring trip ends closer together and increase people's mobility without even touching the streets. And if we do some form-based code, bring them up to the street, then things will be a whole lot more walkable, bikeable, and folks won't have to drive as much, and safety will go up. And there's a cartoon I drew, next slide, which kind of illustrates this point of mixing things and densifying. Hello, mixed land use and density reduced my average weekend trip length about 85%. So this guy's got everything he needs within about 3 feet. So on the weekend, he hardly has to move. And if we could design cities so that people can have everything they need within a 10 or 15 minute walk, it'll increase safety dramatically. Next slide. So we need to keep in mind in all of our policy what mobility really is and what it isn't. Next slide. Now, there's some cities that are growing their populations and their economies while shrinking traffic. And this is because they're doing both good land use planning and good transportation planning. So there's no excuse anymore to say you have to grow your traffic because you're growing your city. Next slide. And the reason they can do this is because they understand mobility. And there's an equation on the next slide, please, that covers this. And these are planning metrics. There's 4 planning metrics. And what we're suggesting these days is to replace levels of service for motorists with these 4 metrics. Level of service is generally a operational metric, which should still be used for things like timing signals and that sort of thing. But for planning purposes, it should not be used anymore, and we should be using these 4 metrics. And the first one is an equation. On the left side of the equal sign is vehicle miles traveled. And then there's modal split, total number of trips, and average trip length. And next slide. So this is the policy equation, or sort of policy statement rather. It's good public policy to reduce vehicle miles traveled. It's good public policy to reduce the percentage of trips made by automobile, so get the modal splits down. And it's also good public policy to increase vibrancy, the total number of trips, all the sorts of trips you want in your city, like shopping trips, work trips, cultural trips, arts trips, social trips, recreational trips. We want all of people to do all these things in cities, which makes them better cities. And then it's good public policy to reduce the average trip length for all trips, particularly those by automobile. And we're working in a number of downtowns where we want to reduce the automobile dependence while simultaneously increasing activity and vibrancy. So those shows in the direction of those arrows. And to do that, we have to change our modal splits and average trip lengths in order to do that. Next slide. And there's literally hundreds of ways of doing this. And to reduce modal splits for automobile use, we can build sidewalks, separated bike facilities, emphasize transit, lower the subsidies that we provide for motorists, traffic demand management. There's all kinds of things in that list, and that's just the partial list. And then for average trip length, we can increase our densities, mixes of land use. We can increase connectivity to our street network. We can lower posted speeds. We can restore one-way streets back to two-way. There's all these sorts of things we can do to do that. And on the left, planners can start thinking about when they're doing residential development, reducing VMT per resident, or for employment, reducing VMT per employee. And engineers can start worrying about reducing VMT over the whole city and VMT per capita. And if we're all working to reduce VMT, that means planners and engineers get out of their silos and start working together to make literally better cities instead of just chasing levels of service and congestion. So it allows us all to work together, all to pull together for better cities, better safety, and less fatal crashes. And we think that the reducing VMT is going to be part of the job description of traffic engineers in cities moving forward. And that would be enlightened public policy to evaluate their performance on their ability to reduce VMT. So now I'm going to go into a case study of a suburban area. Next slide. This suburban area is, there's lots of different contexts from rural all the way to urban, but one of the more challenging contexts is working in the suburbs, with the relatively high speed roads, particularly on arterials. And this is the Rockville Pike, just north of DC. And next slide. The very high profile project, and what was going on was every time they widened the Pike, more sprawl would happen further north, and they kept on getting congestion. And this area built out in the 60s and 70s that you're seeing on this slide, and you can see the common denominator that links everything together here is the car. A lot of surface parking, malls, strip malls, that kind of thing. And these developers were noticing that their values were dropping, the place was getting tired, and they wanted to redevelop and do mixed-use development, but they couldn't because the residences in all these neighborhoods didn't want more traffic. So they would line up and stop any development because they were fearful of more congestion. So what we did is we worked with all of these folks on awareness building. Next slide. So we started pointing out what was there, this totally unwalkable environment. Next slide. How ugly it got. This could be anywhere in the United States, just terrible public realm and image. Next slide. Completely unwalkable and not safe. Lots of unfortunate crashes. Next slide. Just difficult to cross the street. I think those ladies are still standing there on that median trying to get across the street. Next slide. And if you're in a wheelchair or have any other sort of disability, this area is not meant for you. It's not an equitable place. So next slide. So the first thing we did was we took an X-ray of the bones of the place. Next slide. And we looked at all what we call errors in the street network. And what we tried to do was change it to create parallel network and redundant routing. Next slide. So what we're doing here is we're urbanizing the suburban network through connections down property lines and mid-block through super blocks. And when we modeled this, next slide, you can see how the width of the line are proportional to the traffic, how it spread out the volumes. And this allowed more direct routing and more streets doing the heavy lifting. And it also allowed a more walkable environment. Next slide. And you can see the 5 and 10 minute walking contours to the transit station captured a whole lot more land. And all of this combined allowed us to make complete streets on all of these streets so they're comfortable for walking. Next slide. Including the big arterial, which I think is the big challenge. So the Pike is going to turn into this complete street with 18-foot wide sidewalks and separated bike facilities and transit down the middle to give people modal options. What's not increasing is the number of lanes for motorists. Next slide. So instead of the worst address in town, it will become the best address in town. And the developers responded to this idea and supported it. In fact, they were our client. They privately hired us to help the county work out this puzzle. And we worked with all those neighborhoods, and we turned this hostile environment for redevelopment into support by raising their awareness of the benefits of density and mix of land uses and form. And the developers responded with, next slide, with some new imaginations for their properties, which were dense and urban. And the people living in the neighborhoods realized that as they get older, they would have residential choice, so they could age in place and walk and still go to the same church and that kind of thing. Provide the services they need within a short walk or a transit trip, so they didn't have to use their car for every single trip purpose like they did before. Next slide. So this is coming out of the ground now. The network's going in, the buildings are getting built. Next slide. With mixed-use development. And it's really great news. And you can go to the next slide. And then, so this is creating a kind of like a little downtown out there where people can find everything they need at close at hand and reducing automobile dependence and crashes. So that's kind of an overview of kind of a land use response to a completely automobile dependent, high-speed, hostile arterial road through some clever planning of integrated planning between transportation and land use. And with that, what I'd like to do next is open it up to our three panelists who are going to give a few minutes each on their perspectives on this topic. And so we're going to go in order with Melissa Zorneda, Lucia Garces, and Mike Callahan. And I'm going to pass the mic to them, and we'll take turns giving a little address, and then we'll open it up to some questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. I'm Melissa Zorneda. I'm the Executive Director of the Hillsborough County City-County Planning Commission. And we are the long-range planning organization for all 4 local governments here in Hillsborough County. So we handle the development of the comprehensive plan, which guides growth and development and infrastructure policy for Tampa, Temple Terrace, Plant City, and unincorporated Hillsborough County. My focus is mostly on that long-range policy perspective, and all of the comprehensive plans for all 4 local governments have safety and connectivity as primary goals within the transportation elements of their plans. I think that's one of the things that our agency has tried to infuse into the plans for years. Since the late 90s. There have been components of the plans that involve community design, livable roadways. Those types of concepts were put into the plans, but often not with a lot of teeth. And so there's a lot of aspirations in the comprehensive plans that don't necessarily have maybe the regulatory backing that would be beneficial to see all of the things that Ian discussed come to fruition. Some of the highlights as I thought about the plans that we've done have been that I think we've been at the forefront trying to include multimodal options into our plans. Temple Terrace's comprehensive plan is the first one in the state that ever had a multimodal district. So trying to look at not just having roadway level of service be the dictating force in their future growth and development, but also bike and pedestrian and transit measures as well. And we continue to focus on creating more context-sensitive roadway design, looking at tying that, just what Ian spoke about, that land use and transportation tie together. That's something our organization is very passionate about, since we have the MPO as part of our team, but also we're trying to infuse more and more in our comprehensive plans. Our land use pattern doesn't often provide a mix of uses in a walkable distance from each other. Just the examples that Ian showed illustrate just how powerful being able to walk to the store or a park can be to creating a more walkable environment. So the land use has a huge part to do in what type of community we're creating from a safety perspective. The design of those uses, for example, look at our schools. We might not be locating them in a location that is most friendly to being able to walk from your neighborhood. So how can we better integrate some of those uses into our neighborhoods so that it makes it someplace where people have a destination that they want to walk to? Similarly, one of the areas we've been looking at a lot over the last few years is how can we better balance our jobs and housing so that people don't have to commute so far, have options to work closer to where they live, again, facilitating more multimodal choices of how they might be able to get there. Some of the current projects that we're working on are beginning to focus even more on infill and redevelopment, partnering with the city on some neighborhood corridor studies, looking at Main Street in West Tampa and the Bay to Bay corridor in South Tampa, to look at how the land use is supporting the vision that the community wants along that roadway, and then what types of transportation improvements are needed to facilitate that. In the unincorporated county, we're looking at land use studies in the Waimama area and in Balm that are more suburban growth focused, but looking at how we can create complete communities that have more of those community uses integrated and connected within those areas, so they don't all have to commute to Brandon or to downtown Tampa or to the university area for employment. So those are just a few examples of some of the things that we look at. One of the questions I was asked to address was who do we need to partner with to make all of this happen? And first and foremost, our biggest partner are our 4 local governments, because our plans are simply a pipe dream if we don't have their partnership in figuring out how we really implement these policies. So I think that's one of the things that we've spent a lot of time trying to break down the silos between the planners coming up with something in isolation and really integrating that, working with the folks in public works and development services, or in Mike Callahan, who's going to speak in a moment's department with the city of Tampa, to integrate and understand what goes into implementing the policy, so we make sure that the policy is the right fit. And we've seen some successes with that in the county. We worked on a Brandon corridor study that then we worked very closely with the county staff, and they've taken and started looking at some redevelopment options around the Brandon Hospital area. The county also has worked on some plat studies, planning and land use studies to go along with some of their PD&E design processes. And we found that to be a really nice collaboration as well. I don't want to take up too much time, so those are just some brief remarks, and I'll turn it over to Lucia.
Good morning, everyone. Lucia Garces, Deputy County Administrator, Hillsborough County. Truly a delight to be here. And interestingly, the themes that have been started by Ian and Melissa will be picked up here. I'd like to kick off, if I could, with a recognition of how long this culture and economic reality and political and financial environment of our current transportation and mobility network has been around. And I'd like to direct us for a moment, if I could, to this slide that was developed as a result of some work in the 1930s by civil engineers who became traffic engineers. And in 1965, they identified through their ITE, the Institute of Traffic Engineers, developed a principle on which safety should be founded. And they believed, as this slide identifies, that curvilinear patterns with cul-de-sacs and T-intersections really were at the core of ensuring safety for traffic, whether it was mobility, vehicular or pedestrian. And I say this to say that not that all evils come from our engineers, because I truly believe, working with them every day, that they have safety in their hearts, that they really do come from a place of ensuring that our pedestrian traffic, our bicycle traffic, our vehicular traffic, our wheelchair mobility is ensured and is safe. I say this to say that what has happened over the last 100 years has been a singular approach to solving a problem. And so we know that over the last 100 years, from the start of Henry Ford, who thought instead of a chicken in every pot, there should be a car in every garage, the proliferation of vehicular movement through automobile and rubber tire really did proliferate most of the last 100 years. We know the rubber tire industry made it a point to, for economic purposes, to push rubber tire movement up into including the removal of trolleys in a lot of jurisdictions and replacing them with buses. But the traffic piece wasn't just the only piece that created the situation that we're dealing with right now. It's not just transportation. What happened over the last 100 years as well, a little more, is that we know when zoning codes were developed, they were developed with the intent to really try to separate out truly obnoxious uses, separating industry from residential and protecting the public safety. Over the years, that separation of uses, however, began to move residential away from retail more and more over time. The Federal Highway, the Federal Housing Administration did not help with the programs that were established after World War II to provide housing for veterans coming home. It really proliferated the suburbs and the pattern that you see in front of you here before. So my purpose in describing this is not to celebrate the problem. It really is to underscore what Ian and Melissa have already said, which is that these solutions don't come from one place. It has been practiced now, working with Melissa's staff and the MPO, that folks are spending a lot of time understanding what land use means to operations and engineering. And there are many examples of truly sharing information to come to solutions that aren't singular, but do present an opportunity for bringing multiple perspectives to the table and resolving a lot of the issues that the singular lens has resulted in over many, many years. So if we could go to the next slide, please. One of the things that we know is there's two kinds of problem solving. One is the retrofitting that Ian spoke of earlier. The other is how do we build things in the future? And so we have engineering solutions to a lot of the problems that we've already had. And I might add that these engineering solutions are all costly. And just as a note, the volume that unincorporated Hillsborough is dealing with is 3,000 miles of roads. If you line them all up, we could get from Tampa to the West Coast in terms of the miles of roads that we've already built in unincorporated Hillsborough. So the solutions will take time and they will take money. And so whoever mentioned the surtax before is right on target. There is a project underway in the Bloomingdale area called Nature's Way. And that's a retrofit. It is a road diet, taking a road from 4 lanes to 2 lanes for a 1 mile stretch. It's $1.8 million. And so we know that these projects all cost money, and the surtax would go in a long way to addressing a lot of these problems that Hillsborough is now facing on the retrofit. Hillsborough County folks are working with the school board in retrofitting a lot of the areas around schools in a Safe Routes to School program, ensuring that as new schools get built, the sites are selected in areas that have that are aligned with pedestrian patterns in residential developments and leverage the work that developers are building to build sidewalks and safe access. And so that partnership with the school board has become critical. Again, some of the engineering approaches to building some of the new roads also include the roundabouts. Somebody mentioned roundabouts. We have 3 of them underway, and we have 1 underway on Van Dyke, which we have a double roundabout. It's called a peanut. We refer to it lovingly as a peanut roundabout, which really is designed to reduce a lot of the speed and the traffic on Van Dyke. So in addition to that, working with MPO on reducing speed limits on high crash corridors, adding LED lighting on major collectors, and all of that, trying to incrementally, as best as we can, address those high priority areas. I think I'd like to go to the next slide if we could. In addition to the engineering solutions, and this is really at the crux of what Melissa and Ian were talking about, is understanding that roadways, corridors, mobility corridors, however we ultimately want to call them, serve a different purpose in different areas, but they all have the fundamental relationship to building communities. And so to run a major highway through an area that is designed and intended to be walkable really does fly in the face of safety. But the more we understand the purpose of different corridors and the purpose of that they're trying to serve and their relationship to community building, the more we will advance this comprehensive approach to solving the issue of crashes and accidents and deaths in our community. If you haven't had the chance to look at 131st Street, there is a short stretch of 131st Street that extends from US 41 to right to the university. What is really unique about that project, and it will serve as a model moving forward, is that the analysis that was done there wasn't a PD&E of trying to determine how you just widen a road, or fix a road, or move a building, or add a stormwater pond. It was really designed to look at what are the patterns of travel, who's traveling how. It worked, the folks on that project worked with the UACDC to understand what the movement and patterns were, and understood that in that area, wheelchairs were a very real mode of transportation, and ensuring that folks could, in a wheelchair, access appropriately. That project is now in PD&E, and with appropriate funding, hoping to move it forward, and then really serving as a major pilot for how we deal with transportation. But if we could go to the next slide, please. The important piece here too, though, is to understand that once we look at this context classification that was identified in the previous slide, what becomes really important is that all of the other documents that follow through, whether that is somebody who is building a developer-built road, or someone who is or whether the county is developing, has the appropriate design standards and all of the other component pieces. And this is just a snapshot of all the different documents and guidelines and rules that come into play to start to change how we think about volume to capacity and begin to think about the movement of pedestrians and bicycles. And with that, I will close my remarks and be available for questions. Thank you.
Mike, you're up. Mike, are you around?
Yes, I am. There I am. Hi, everyone. Very pleased to be here. this morning. In fact, I'd like to say on behalf of Carol Post, our tireless leader at Development Services, I wanted to thank the MPO for inviting us to the Vision Zero Summit. You know, we at the city have come to realize and wholeheartedly support the whole concept of the Vision Zero for all of our new developments. And, you know, for us, it's about making our roads so much safer. You know, I have a dual perspective. As I recently transitioned, in fact, I don't think Melissa and folks even know that I have transitioned after 10 years in development services over to the CRA. So I'm principally focused now on all the new development in the downtown and the Channel District area. So I have that perspective that I'd like to share a little bit about some of the things that we're doing here at the city that I think are very important, especially as it pertains to Vision Zero. You know, our form-based codes for Seminole Heights, the CBD, Central Business District, and our overlay districts all have a strong emphasis on walkability. You know, so here are some of the examples of that. You know, our off-street parking is to be incorporated to the side or rear of the buildings. We promote on-street parking where applicable for obviously for traffic calming. Much wider sidewalks, especially along our arterials and collectors. You know, in Seminole Heights and Nebraska and Florida, when we first started creating the form-based code, walking along Florida on 5-foot sidewalks is, I have to tell you, very harrowing. And you know, that's changing with our new developments. These sidewalks will now go from 8 to 10 feet, and adding so much more comfort. In fact, our Central Business District, when we created the form-based code for the Central Business District, it's all about the pedestrian. Where we've identified every street in downtown. Believe me, I walked every single street in the CBD. And so we have categorized them as a street, which is a priority pedestrian street, 20-foot public realm. A B street, which is a transit mobility street, which is 15-foot pedestrian, or I should say the public realm, and the C street, which is the back of house that services the new development. So we've created much wider public realms throughout. And of course, we promote raised crosswalks for traffic calming purposes and many others. So more recently in my role, my 2.5-week role in the community development department here, we're working very closely with the mobility department. And take note, please, it's no longer the transportation division, it's the mobility department. And we're incorporating many safety features along our downtown streets to ensure walkability and safety. So let me tell you about some of those. So, we've incorporated curb bulb outs on many of our redesigned street improvements, both designed and constructed. I think Gina showed one of the slides that depicted Jefferson Street as one of them. We have painted intersections and crosswalks for pedestrian and bike lanes. If you remember, Mayor Castro was very involved with joining one of the very first Vision Zero concepts, that's crosswalks to classrooms. Last November, where the city's first artistic crosswalk was painted downtown at the Rampello Magnet School, emphasizing the safety of our school children. And then more recently, we have an artist, Megan Scalise, was commissioned to paint an intersection on Franklin and Twiggs, and other intersections have come along. And most recently, I think last weekend, even we have a street mural painted on North Ashley. We're facilitating our projects for multimodal uses, which would include Uber and Lyft and scooters and electric bikes, while introducing a concept that I've kind of learned over the last year, curbside management, to allow for flex spaces in front of our buildings, instead of, just the old fixed vehicle parking spaces. And so you're going to be able to see that in our new five-star hotel, our first five-star hotel downtown. That's on Water Street. It's called the Edition Hotel. You also see it at X Tampa. It's on. It will be under construction in the first quarter of the year, which is a 26-story residential mixed-use project on Zach Street. We're also working to reestablish the grid out in the southwest part of the city with the old Ardent Mills flower plant. That will be gone in due time here, and we're going to reestablish the grid with the appropriate sidewalk widths. We have protected bike lanes along Jackson Street, Cass Street along the Green Spine that travels all the way from West Tampa through downtown out to the Ybor City area. We're constructing a much safer and stronger connection to the Riverwalk across Cass Street. If you traveled the Riverwalk, you've noticed that's kind of a weird crossing there, but in fact, it's being constructed right now. I've been out there all week making sure that it's constructed correctly. But that's going to connect the Riverwalk across Cass adjacent to the adjacent Strass Center. We're redesigning, and this is very exciting, a channel side drive incorporating significant traffic calming measures, crosswalks, and a new bike lane, all the while accommodating the port's cruise traffic. And then the design of the Riverwalk along the west bank of the river. We recently acquired a grant helping to complete that vision of the Hillsborough River as the center of our CBD. And then lastly, well, it's not really lastly, but just lastly in my little presentation here is I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Bayshore Boulevard. Gone are the days when you could put your cruise control in downtown and travel to Gandy at 45 miles an hour without thinking about anything. Those days are gone. The pedestrian, the bike awareness has been heightened significantly with new PED flashers, RFBs, addition of new traffic signals at Euclid and Rome that make this iconic boulevard eminently safer. So all these improvements with really so many more to come represent the city's commitment to the Vision Zero philosophy of making our roads and communities considerably safer for all of our citizens who use them. So that's really what I wanted to say. I hope I did that in a timely fashion. So thank you.
So Commissioner Kemp, you're on mute, but while you unmute, I just want to thank Mike and Melissa and Lucia for their comments and their perspectives on what the MPO is doing and what you're doing for increasing the experience of the pedestrians, the historic perspective and that kind of thing. I think it was very helpful for everybody on the call. And so we'll wrap up and pass the baton to Commissioner Kemp to carry on with the next session. Thank you. Commissioner Kemp, I think you're on mute.
I have it off here.
Yeah, you're good now.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And we've been moving along at a good pace here. So thank you so much to our first panel, Ian Lockwood and Melissa Zornita, Lucia Garces, and Mike Callahan. Thank you for those presentations. We're going to move next to our next panel, High Visibility Enforcement, working together how we can make the best use of law enforcement resources to deter the most dangerous traffic behaviors. And I'd like to welcome to head up this panel, Chief Brett Raley. Chief Raley has over 39 years of experience in law enforcement. He led the development of the curriculum on pedestrian and bicycle law enforcement laws, procedures, and best practices for the Florida DOT. And he was presented the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration's Public Service Lifesaver Award. Thank you so much for being with us, Chief Raley.
Thank you, Commissioner, and welcome everybody. I've noticed that we've got quite a few attendees here on the seminar, and we appreciate you being here. We're going to be talking a little bit about leadership because that is part of the title of the summit. But specifically, we're going to talk about high visibility enforcement and how we can lead the way in best utilizing our resources to deter dangerous driving behavior. That's part of what we're going to talk about. We'll first lay the background. The next slide, please. By asking, as a leader, where do we start? And if you look at what W. Edwards Deming said, he's a data scientist. He says, without data, you're just another person with an opinion. And if you think about that, leaders need more than just opinions in order to lead. They need to know the data. So if we'll go to the next slide, we can look at the national challenge that we're all faced with. There we go. If we look at our annual U.S. traffic fatalities across time, starting back in 1921 and going up through actually just past 2017, we can see that there have been ups and downs, and for a lot of different reasons, the numbers have increased and decreased. You'll see some of them listed there on the screen. But the troubling part is look at the recession over on the right-hand side where we have 2008 and what's happened since then. Obviously, vehicle miles traveled have gone up since the recession, and probably a little hiccup's going to show on the overall charts when we start looking back at the pandemic and the vehicle miles traveled during the pandemic. But to have an uptick is troubling, and we have to do something about it. This is what's happening nationally. If we go to the next slide, let's look at what's happening here in Florida. And of particular concern, one of our challenges is that we rank first in the nation for bicyclist fatalities. 1 in 20 traffic fatalities is a bicyclist. And normally we would think that because we're a tourist state, that our problem deals with people coming from out of state and not knowing how to drive in our weather because of the rain and all of that. But look at it. 98% of the bicyclists fatally injured in Florida were Florida residents, and 90% of the drivers were Florida residents. So we've got Florida residents killing Florida residents on our roadways, and this is troubling. Let's go to the next slide, because not just do we rank first in bicycle fatalities, but we rank second in the nation in pedestrian fatalities. Again, 1 in 5 fatalities is a pedestrian, and just like in our bicycle issue, 95% of the pedestrians fatally injured are Florida residents, and 90% of the drivers are Florida residents. And again, we have to do something about that, and I'll show you and talk with you more about what we're doing in the law enforcement side to address that. If we can go to the next slide, looking back nationally, there's 36,560 fatalities in 2018 traffic data, but look where the majority of those fatalities are occurring: impaired driving, unbuckled occupants or unrestrained occupants, speed-related violations, and pedestrians. Looking at bicyclists down at the end. Now, you may look at distracted driving and say, why isn't that showing up more? Well, as you know, here in Florida and in many states across the country, we've been a long time coming getting a primary enforcement law for distracted driving. So the data is not being collected. And so I think that will start playing a bigger role as the data gets collected, moving across the nation as laws are enacted that have become helpful. If we can go to the next slide. We want to focus where our resources are coming from and where we're training our resources. If you look here, the dark maroon shows percentage-wise or in numbers our local police, the sheriff's office in gray, and then the blue is primary state police. And most state police or highway patrol have as their main focus patrolling the highways and enforcing traffic violations. Not necessarily so with local police and our sheriff's offices. And so what we're trying to concentrate on the national scale is to train our local police and sheriff's offices and encourage them to get involved in traffic safety efforts. We're doing that here in Florida also. And when we talk about traffic safety, we need to know what the basic pillars of traffic safety are that we're pushing forward. And we're doing this, if we can go to the next slide, in a National Highway Traffic Safety Administration sponsored program that I and a team that are working on that contract are delivering across the country. But every element of what you're about to see involves high visibility enforcement. I'm going to throw something out to you that might seem a little counterintuitive now, because as we have dealt with the pandemic, as we have dealt with the national dialogue about policing, we're starting to see more and more leaning towards high visibility engagement as opposed to enforcement. Engagement meaning that we stop the violator, tell them what they've done is wrong, and then not necessarily depend on traffic citations as the only way of measuring success. It's the engagement and the education of the violator, no matter how you end that traffic stop, that is proving more and more effective. Next slide, please. The first pillar is data-driven approaches to crime and traffic safety, or DDACS. Many of you on this call may have heard of that, many more may have not. And so very briefly, DDACS is taking your locations, it's location-based policing, location where your crashes are occurring, overlaying those with where your crimes are occurring or your social harms that you're trying to address in your community, and addressing both with the single deployment of your resources so that you become more efficient and effective in dealing with both crime and crashes as you're deploying your resources. Next slide, please. Pillar 2 is the advanced roadside impaired driving enforcement. Many officers are being taught standardized field sobriety testing in the police academy, but there is more. A-RIDE is what this is known as, goes beyond strictly standardized field sobriety testing and teaches the officers to start recognizing the signs of impaired driving. Next slide. And then finally, we look at our drug recognition expert course, and many communities across the country have trained drug recognition experts, and these trained experts are taught to take a case where signs of impairment indicate that drugs are involved in the impairment, not just alcohol, and begin gathering evidence for court presentations so that our experts can come in and testify and show that, in fact, drugs were the cause of the impairment. Next slide. The fourth pillar is putting all of this together. Operation CARE combines efforts across the country of all law enforcement agencies in waves and in specific strategic deployments to address the problems that happen to be the issue of the day. I'll show you more about that when I show you that they coordinate with the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration's enforcement calendar. Let's go to the next slide. How are we doing this? Each of those are pillars that we all know need to be improved on within our agencies, but we're actually doing it by, next slide, here in Florida, addressing the pedestrian and bicycle safety issues by training our law enforcement professionals in the pedestrian and bicycle law, procedures, and best practices. They initially go through a 4-hour classroom training so that they have the opportunity to ask questions. I know that when I went through the police academy, and for most of my career, I didn't pay attention to pedestrian and bicyclists out on the roadway. They were something that were there. I was looking more at the drivers of motor vehicles. And then in my later years, found out the problem and began starting to address it with the Alert Today, Arrive Tomorrow Florida Department of Transportation program in coordinated efforts with the Institute of Police Technology and Management in Jacksonville. What this course does is allows officers that we've trained to participate in overtime enforcement, high visibility enforcement, high visibility engagement in areas that are data driven, where we have the highest instances of traffic fatalities and serious injuries in crashes. And then we have developed a 2-hour annual refresher, which is available not only to refresh the officers who've gone through the initial course, but it's also available to any officer in the state of Florida that wants to know more about pedestrian and bicycle law. This gives an officer more training than they've ever had in their career on specific pedestrian and bicycle law enforcement. Next slide. If we look at the NHTSA communications calendar, you can see that there are all types of enforcement efforts that go throughout the entire year. Operation CARE encourages agencies nationwide to coordinate their efforts with the NHTSA communications calendar. We encourage people to conduct their waves during times that are indicated in the NHTSA communications calendar. And when I say waves, I'm talking about high visibility waves, so that you can benefit from the publicity that NHTSA puts out and the combined efforts of people in adjoining and neighboring jurisdictions all doing the same thing with the same time frame and the same goal in mind, and that's reducing the individual crashes that are involved in all of the different types of enforcement. Next slide, please. When we talk about high visibility enforcement or high visibility engagement, what we're talking about is combining enforcement, visibility elements, and publicity to educate the public and promote voluntary compliance with the law. It does us no good if we don't encourage and achieve voluntary compliance with the law. There aren't enough police officers to be on every street corner, to be on every highway, to encourage people to comply with the law. And so voluntary compliance is our ultimate goal. Next slide. We do this through saturation patrols, and that's where you increase your officers conducting enforcement in targeted areas to gain that voluntary compliance with the traffic laws and to create and promote general deterrence to traffic violations. If you wonder how general deterrence works, think about when you're driving down the turnpike and all of a sudden you see a trooper in your rearview mirror. Despite whether you're speeding or not, what's the first thing you do? You take your foot off the gas, you look at the speedometer. That is a general deterrence to committing further traffic violations. It also gives that presence, which is omnipresence, which helps create the voluntary compliance with traffic law. Next. If we look at waves, waves are increased enforcement of a specific traffic violation in a targeted location. All of these are driven by data. We go where the data takes us so that we know that we can be most effective and efficient with our deployment. And usually these occur for a very short period of time, and they are periodically enforced. And some examples: school zone enforcement, speed enforcement, occupant restraint enforcement, DUI enforcement are examples of some of the waves. But it doesn't work without the next slide, publicity. High visibility enforcement has to be coordinated and include equal components of enforcement, visibility, and publicity. And that includes the media, social media, public outreach messaging, and letting people know that you have a consistent message. You can't drive that way, in my case, in Winter Park. That's what we were looking for. You can't drive that way in our city. You've got to obey traffic laws if you're going to come to our city. The HVE message has to emphasize enforcement, targeting that specific traffic safety problem. If you'll go to the next slide, when I talk about publicity and visibility, some examples are up on the screen: electronic message boards, pop-up road signs, billboards. High visibility is not just being there and hoping that people see the officer and behave when they're driving through that area. It's maximizing these visibility efforts including specially marked vehicles, magnetic high visibility enforcement signs on cars, specially marked vests on the officers, and flyers, brochures that are handed out to violators who are stopped in those areas. Next. We have challenges, and if you'll go to the next slide, I'll mention some of them. Some of the challenges to enhancing law enforcement's efforts and traffic safety efforts are getting buy-in from the staff and officers or deputies, resistance to new ideas. It's been said that the only thing that cops hate worse than change is the way things are. And so when you try and come in and encourage new ideas, cops are resistant. We need to overcome that. You have to customize a plan for your agency, get buy-in from your city and or county officials. And I'm encouraged with Hillsborough by seeing the broad range of people who are represented on this call from county government, and then ensure that the officers have the appropriate training. If we'll go to the next slide. There are other pressing priorities though. Traffic enforcement isn't the only thing that law enforcement or police agencies have to do. There needs to be funding for staffing. As our calls for service increase, our discretionary time to use in traffic enforcement becomes hampered. Sometimes there is a political impact of increased enforcement, and knowing that the public has your back and your political leaders have your back is important for the officers when they go out and do their job. Lack of officer initiative sometimes to enforce traffic laws, particularly now when we started out in this pandemic knowing that, or not knowing how COVID-19 was transmitted. And many agencies just took an approach that we're only going to stop the most egregious violations and let everything else go to limit the contact for the officer with potential carriers of COVID. And then with the political climate, the climate of law enforcement defunding and things like that, sometimes we have to work to increase the officer's initiative. And then many officers just don't want to work overtime anymore. That's a new challenge that is strange to my generation coming up in law enforcement. Next. A lot of times there's lack of a clear direction from the agency head. And if the agency head lets the officers know that it's important to he or her, then all of a sudden the agency begins turning that way. Lack of familiarity with the NHTSA communications calendar. It can be found online. If an agency wants to coordinate their efforts and get the most out of what's happening across the country, they can look at that NHTSA communications calendar. And then lack of familiarity with other nationwide or statewide initiatives. Go back to the next slide. If you remember, I showed you this as I'm wrapping up at the beginning. If we can just encourage our officers to start when we begin re-engaging with law enforcement, high visibility engagement and enforcement, to enforce impaired driving related crimes, occupant restraint violations, speed related violations, and pedestrian related violations, just keying in on those will address about 80% of our traffic fatalities nationwide. And so if we start there and then work our way out from there, it gives us a jump off point for re-engaging in traffic safety. Next slide. To overcome our challenges, we need to start doing something. Remain flexible, remain adaptable, looking at ways that we can engage with the motoring public to save lives. Don't give up, because saving lives is worth it. Final slide. I'm honored to be joined by Sergeant Paul Promberger with the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office, Captain Pat Messmer with the Tampa Police Department, and Secretary David Gwynn with Florida Department of Transportation's District 7. As I call your name, please turn your camera on and tell us what you're doing in your individual discipline to help with these traffic safety efforts. Sergeant Promberger, what's the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office doing?
Yes, thank you, Chief. First of all, my name is Paul Pramberger, and I'd like to start off by thanking the County Commissioners, Beth Alden and Gina Torres, for inviting the Sheriff's Office to be a part of the Vision Zero Leadership Summit. A little bit of background about myself. I've been employed with the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office for 19 years. Been very fortunate in my career to have worked in a multitude of areas within the Sheriff's Office. For the past year, I've been assigned to the Traffic Division within District 1. District 1 covers the northern communities of Hillsborough County to include New Tampa, Lutz, and the University area. The Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office is made up of 5 districts, which provide law enforcement services for all of the unincorporated Hillsborough County. Each district has its own traffic unit, which is made up of motor units, accident investigators, and community resource deputies. In 2019, the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office investigated 20 traffic fatalities involving pedestrians and 3 fatalities involving bicyclists. In 70% of the pedestrian-related fatalities, the pedestrians either failed to utilize a marked crosswalk when crossing the roadway, or they were struck while walking along the roadway. Of the bicycle fatalities, 1 was hit while riding impaired at night with no lights, and 1 was hit when the driver failed to observe the bicyclists as they pulled out the traffic. Throughout the year, the Sheriff's Office participates in a number of operational grants which focus on traffic safety. Some of these grants are the Know Your Limits Speed Grant, which focuses on speeders and aggressive drivers. The Teen Driving Grant, which focuses on educating younger drivers on the importance of wearing their seatbelt and the dangers of texting while driving. The Motorcycle Grant, which focuses on motorcycle safety, speeding, and various other violations. And the High Visibility Enforcement Pedestrian Bicycle Grant, which focuses on educating pedestrians and bicyclists on how to properly utilize crosswalks and the correct direction they should travel along our roadways when walking or bicycling. As the District 1 Traffic Unit Supervisor, I was responsible for coordinating the High Visibility Enforcement Pedestrian Bicycle Grant. And in 2020, the Pedestrian Bicycle Grant focused on 4 major corridors within the county, to include Fletcher Avenue from Bruce B. Downs Boulevard to Nebraska Avenue, Waters Avenue from Hines Avenue to Sheldon Road, Hillsborough Avenue from Memorial Highway to Hoover Boulevard, and Bloomingdale Avenue from Highway 301 to Lithia Pinecrest Road. Unfortunately, the bicycle pedestrian grant was cut short due to the COVID-19 pandemic. However, our deputies were able to conduct enforcement operations for at least the first 4 months of the beginning of the year. Deputies mainly focused on educating the general public on bicycle safety and how to properly utilize our crosswalks. In conjunction with the pedestrian bicycle grant, the Sheriff's Office coordinated a number of bicycle rodeos at various boys and girls clubs, recreational centers, and summer camps throughout the county. These rodeos were meant to educate young and old riders on bicycle safety and gave each rider a chance to practice these safety measures on a closed road course designed by our deputies. The course consisted of various road hazards such as stop signs, traffic lights, intersections, speed bumps, and railroad crossings. Prior to participating in the road course, each rider was fitted with a new bicycle helmet, which they were able to keep upon completion of the course. And in 2019, the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office fitted approximately 500 bicycle helmets to riders who completed the course. I would also like to thank Julie Bond from the Center for Urban Transportation at the University of South Florida, who was a great assistance during these bicycle safety rodeos. Deputies continue to monitor high crash corridors within the county. The district traffic units regularly deploy digital signboards, speed trailers, and traffic data devices along county roads in an attempt to deter speeding and aggressive drivers. The traffic unit supervisors share the recorded traffic data with the county traffic engineers, and the county traffic engineers then review the collected data to determine if speed limits on the selected roadways need to be changed, new traffic lights installed, or the need for raised crosswalks to be built. It is important that these partnerships between land use, design, high visibility enforcement, and public messaging continue so we can truly work towards Vision Zero's goal, which is 0 fatalities or serious injuries on our roadways. In closing, the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office remains committed to making the roadways of Hillsborough County safe for everyone to travel upon. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarge. Sounds like y'all are incorporating all of those elements into your high visibility enforcement. And I appreciate what the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Department is contributing to the overall state effort. Captain Messmer, can you share with us what Tampa Police Department is doing?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me here. Tampa Police Department's really happy to be part of the Leadership Summit. Vision Zero is very important to the city, and I think this is a great great platform for us to get the message out about Vision Zero. So I don't really want to be repetitive. A lot of the things that Sergeant Pramberger just mentioned and the Chief just mentioned, these are accepted best practices in the law enforcement field, and they're also things that the Tampa Police Department's doing, such as the variable message boards, speed trailers, messaging, and things like that. So I want to get into a little bit more specifics about things, at the Tampa Police Department and what we do. As a lot of people who follow the news know, Tampa Police Department has had about a 70% crime reduction since 2003. And one of the reasons that happened was because we redeployed our resources where the crimes were actually occurring. And like the Chief mentioned in his presentation, traffic enforcement is very similar. If we want to reduce the fatality crashes and the serious injury crashes, we've got to deploy our enforcement resources in those areas where you have a lot of those crashes. So that is really primarily what we do as far as our traffic unit, which is centralized, and our DUI unit, which is centralized. They will address their efforts on these crash hotspots where we have our serious injury and our fatality crashes. Now, in addition to that, we also have to be responsive to citizen complaints. I was just dealing with a complaint earlier this week. A lady called us because people started to use her neighborhood street as a cut through due to some road construction. So even though there hasn't been a fatality on that street, we still have to address that and address that speeding issue before we end up having a problem. So I'm able to deploy my resources from the district and our traffic and DUI resources if needed, depending on the hours where the action's occurring, to address the citizen complaints in addition to the actual known location. So it's not just data driven, because sometimes there could be an issue on a street with speeding where we have vulnerable road users. We can't wait for there to be a fatality before we address that. So we have to be responsive there too. In addition, the education and the outreach, it's a major component, not just the enforcement. So we actually had a class that we started this year once we saw a spike in motorcycle fatalities, where we have citizens come out to our driving pad and they work with our motor officers and our motor instructors on safe motorcycle practices. So that was successful. It was cut short due to COVID, but we are reinstituting that as the COVID case numbers shrink some. In addition to that, our DUI squad goes out to the high schools. They conduct education for high school students to make sure they know the dangers of driving while impaired. And as the Chief mentioned, we're kind of leaning a lot toward education as it relates to context. Not necessarily we're going to write everybody a ticket, but we can educate that driver and give them a warning. Now, we document our warnings, so if an officer goes and stops that driver again for a similar infraction, then they're going to see that driver was just warned, so probably the education didn't do its job. So in that case, we're probably going to need to move on to a citation in order to get that compliance. In addition to that, we do the bike rodeos as well with our bicycle squad. We put on multiple bicycle rodeos each year. We have an occupant safety grant that we're focusing on child seats. We have officers who are donating or giving out child seats that FDOT has provided us to families that can't afford child seats. We're making sure the child seats are in the cars and installed the right way, and conducting education on that. Another important thing that we're doing internally, we're working with our homeless liaisons to address the problem of homelessness. And in addition to that, of course, the City of Tampa has some strategic plans for how to move forward with our homeless situation. And I mention that because so far this year, 70% of our pedestrians killed in traffic fatalities have been homeless. Last year, it was a little under 60%. A lot of them are intoxicated. So, that issue of homeless individuals who are impaired on the roads, that is contributing a lot to our pedestrian fatalities. And, I have to mention our partnership with our outside agencies, Mr. Gwynn and FDOT, the amount of grants that we've been able to obtain from FDOT to fund this high visibility enforcement, to fund a lot of our education. I don't know that we would be able to really do a lot of this without these grants. The bike lights that we're able to provide, about 30% of our bicycle fatalities, only about 30% of them actually have bike lights at night. So being able to hand those out and educate people and give them the bike light that they may not be able to afford, I think is very important. And then obviously we will partner with our non-governmental organizations, our nonprofits such as Bike Walk Tampa Bay and On Bikes, to attend their events, to conduct outreach, and to promote the multimodal transportation goals. So I think that's a very high level overview of the things we do. So I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Captain, and we appreciate the leadership that the Tampa Police Department has displayed over the years. This is not just something new to y'all. You have a long history of leading the way in traffic safety, and that educational component has been critical in reducing fatalities, especially with our pedestrian and bicycle safety area. Secretary Gwynn, can you tell us, I've heard your name mentioned in a complimentary way in the last presentation. You must be doing a lot over there. Can you share with us what FDOT and specifically District 7 is doing to help address the problems?
Yes, and thank you. First, and I'm honored to be on this panel. I would obviously thank our law enforcement partners and for both your service and the support you provide to FDOT. We couldn't do a lot of the things that we do without your support, and we greatly appreciate that. At FDOT, many of you probably think of us as primarily being in charge of the state road system, and that is a big part of our role. However, when it comes to safety, we also administer the federal safety funds for all roads, whether they be state roads or local roads. And because a lot of our crashes and fatalities occur on local roads, it's important that we stretch the span of our reach beyond the state roads, and that requires partnerships with our law enforcement partners, with our education partners, with the counties and cities within our district. So there's a lot of partnerships, and I'll talk a little bit about that today. We, as a department, we have adopted Vision Zero. We realize that even one loss of life is too many. And for those of us who have lost family members in vehicle accidents, you know that every single one of those count. So we always want to keep that in mind, ultimately, to get to that vision of zero fatalities and serious injuries on our state highway system and local road system. Right now, we're going through the development of a new strategic plan at FDOT, and we're doing it a little differently this year. We're doing it with what we call our vital few. We're focusing on the vital few things that really should drive how we drive our program. And the very first one in the top of that list is safety, along with mobility technology. We have also focused within the safety realm on the three areas where we see the primary number of fatalities and serious injuries being pedestrian and bicycle crashes, intersection crashes, and lane departure crashes. Now, when we look at enforcement, the Florida Department of Transportation every year provides about $4 million of grants statewide for high visibility enforcement, primarily focused in areas where we have pedestrian and bicycle problems with our crashes. But we also provide funding on top of that for work zones. We want to make sure that people are driving safely through work zones, which is also an area where we have a lot of crashes. We also work with law enforcement to provide training workshops. We also have the liaison program where we have law enforcement officer liaisons that work directly with our staff on a continuous basis. But we're also looking very hard at education. We know that the law enforcement can do a lot, the engineering, which I'll talk about in a second, can do a lot, but the education is really a very critical component of this. We fund Bike Walk Tampa Bay approximately $500,000 a year to help us in the education area as well as other areas. But we also provide a safety academy every year for all of the local government agencies and our partners to come in. We talk about a lot of the things that we can do for safety, that they can do, resources that they may not be aware of, advances in technology and in other areas. And that's become something that statewide we're going to start focusing on, and District 7 will serve as the example for that. Also, as you heard from some of the law enforcement partners, we're also looking to distribute some of those safety equipment items that really can help, the reflectors, the lights, things that just will help those vulnerable road users, especially if they may be someone who's homeless or otherwise doesn't have access or resources to acquire those pieces of equipment, to provide it so that they can be more visible within our roadways. On the engineering side, a lot of times we talk about speed limits, and we really do want to focus on speed management. And by speed management, we mean putting the right speeds in the right places. For many years, we know that the roads were designed primarily for moving cars, and a lot of times moving cars very quickly and efficiently. And over time, we found that in a lot of those corridors, that's really not the appropriate speeds, and we need to find ways to decrease them. And just by posting a speed limit sign out there and saying instead of going 45, you got to go 35, unfortunately, that doesn't do the trick. People tend, short of having a law enforcement out there that's highly visible, a lot of times people are going to go at the speeds they feel comfortable driving at. And then if you have a good number of people who decide to follow the speed limit, and you have a lot of others who don't, you get all the erratic driving of people trying to pass the people who are following the law. So we have to use engineering over time to be able to create the environment where people feel that the comfortable speed is the appropriate speed. And one of the things that we're doing in District 7 to help with that is we're taking a lot of our district money that in the past may have been used for a capacity project or other projects that maybe weren't related to speed management or safety, and putting them on top of our resurfacing program to take advantage of an opportunity to get out there and do some additional enhancements that are beyond the scope of a typical resurfacing project. Recently, you've seen some projects on Bush Boulevard, on Hillsborough Avenue, where we started to implement some of these. We put in a large number of pedestrian hybrid beacons, which are mid-block crossing opportunities that actually stop the traffic, allow the pedestrian to cross, in addition to the RRFBs that we've put in on a lot of our roadways already. We also have a very robust design build push button program, which allows us, instead of programming a project and waiting to the 5-year plan to get that in, to be able to accelerate many of the higher profile and highly needed safety projects more quickly and get them in the ground instead of in 5 years, maybe within a year. We've been putting a lot of other devices out, like speed feedback signs. You may have seen on some of our roads, we're putting signs that remind the driver that they're speeding. It tells them how fast they're going. Hopefully people, when they see that, will realize that they need to slow down. We've also looked at a number of our roadways for doing lane eliminations. Recently on Highland, we did a lane elimination in order to try and slow the traffic down and make it safer for pedestrians and bicyclists by providing an environment in a part within the roadway where they could do that. We're also doing similar studies right now on other roadways within the district, some for bus rapid transit routes and others for opportunities to widen sidewalks or provide other amenities that would make the road safer. We're getting ready to start later this year a project on Kennedy Boulevard, where we'll be able to not only provide additional crossing opportunities along Kennedy for pedestrians, but also widen the sidewalks out to make them much more comfortable and safe for pedestrians to walk in. The last thing I'd just like to mention is on the partnerships. Again, we really appreciate the partnerships that we have. Our community traffic safety teams meet monthly throughout the district and provide a lot of good ideas and help us to do things that we can do within our roadways. Bike Walk Tampa Bay helping us very much. The high school safety education and outreach to users and businesses has been very successful. And of course, our local agencies. We've been doing a lot of partnerships. A good example, a recent one, is with the city of Tampa, where we found the need for a traffic signal on MLK at 26th with the schools and the new library. And we didn't think we could wait the 3 or 4 years that we typically wait to build it. So we got with the city, together we were able to provide funding together and build something quicker. And so we're always looking for those opportunities. And I do appreciate what we heard earlier from our law enforcement partners that, you know, the goal is not to send the officers out there and just write tickets. The goal is to try to change behavior, to try to get people to understand that there's corridors where they should not be driving that fast, and there's reasons for them not driving that fast. And by doing it with a more of an educational approach, I think is many times much more effective than just a simple ticket or enforcement. So with that, thank you very much, and I'll turn it back over to Chief.
Thank you, Secretary. And the partnership that the Florida Department of Transportation has entered into with all of our local agencies is critical to the success of what we're trying to do, especially the forward-looking road safety audits that y'all are helping us with and that we're helping you with are doing more in the prevention of issues than being reactive and having to go and do cleanup on the other end. As it goes back to what Sir Robert Peel said back in the 1800s, is the sign of effectiveness of law enforcement is not the visible presence of their efforts to increase that effectiveness, but the absence of that visible presence when people are voluntarily complying. And we appreciate everything that you're doing with that. Secretary, if I could, you may have addressed this already. You did address it a little bit from the engineering aspect, but speed. Knowing that it's a major contributor to crash severity and survivability, is there more that could be done in the enforcement arena to encourage safe driving speeds? I appreciate your engineering efforts, but what can we do on the enforcement side to help?
Yeah, and I know we're probably getting stretched on time here. I'll try to address quickly. First, the communications is really the key in our opinion. We need to get the key people at the different agencies and of course law enforcement to be involved so that the message can cascade through the organizations and we can get that out. The CTST is also another excellent platform. The speed management over time, the design will help with that. But of course, we know that law enforcement is stretched very thin. You have a lot to do. You don't have enough budget. And so sometimes, you know, enforcing the speeds we can't do it as much as we'd like. But I think continuing to help us on the high visibility enforcement areas, that we've shown that it really does create a difference even after the high visibility enforcement leaves. It seems like the behavior stays down and allows us to keep speed limits lower on Bush Boulevard. It certainly did that. After you left, the speed stayed lower and we were able to keep the speed limit. So, and then on aggressive driving and speed, just in general, hopefully at some point we can get the community and as a whole to realize that distracted driving, those sort of things just need to go away.
Thank you very much. And knowing that we've been asked to do more with less, and law enforcement's continually asked that, Captain, can you share with me your thoughts on automated enforcement? Or we need to go with questions from the audience? What do we need to do?
I think we actually have to wrap up on this segment. I thank you for being part of it. We're going to have to move along to the next segment, but thank you so much, Chief Raley, and as well to the panelists, Sergeant Paul Pramberger of the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office, Captain Pat Messner of the Tampa Police Department, and Secretary Gwynn of Florida DOT District 7. Thank you so much. We are here with our Vision Zero workshop in Hillsborough County, and I am very, very pleased to introduce the next panel and have followed your work, Mr. Hadaway, for quite some time. This panel will be, and there was a little prelude to that just now, acknowledging the human tendency to be skeptical of change. How do we engage residents and businesses in becoming champions for safe streets? It's about public messaging. And we have here Billy Hadaway, who's had almost 40 years of professional transportation and engineering experience. He's held many roles, including key leadership with the Department of Transportation Consulting and as Director of Transportation for the City of Orlando. He formed and led the Vision Zero group at the Florida DOT Pedestrian Bike Safety Coalition and was a co-chair for rewriting the Florida Green Book to a complete street approach. So with that, we can turn this over to Mr. Hadaway. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. It's an honor to be here today. This is a subject that I'm very passionate about for those of you who know me, and I'm going to shut off my video so we can focus on the slideshow. So next, please, Steph. So I spent about 28 years at Florida DOT, and back in 1995, when I became the state roadway design engineer, we had right at 42,000 people dying on our roads every year. So I became very passionate about transportation safety as the state roadway design engineer. But prior to that, I spent 8 years in District 5 and started out as the district structures engineer. And like many people in the district, sometimes you learn lessons through very painful efforts, and hopefully you learn from those and do things differently. So back then, our kind of view was we're the transportation department and we're here to help. And the conventional approach back then was you have a problem and this is what we're going to do. And the example I want to use here was a project in New Smyrna Beach, the North Causeway Bridge replacement. And we knew that we had mechanical problems with the bridge. And so we were supposed to do a study to evaluate how to replace it. Unfortunately, in our work program listing, for those of you at the MPO understand what that is, 5 years prior to this study, in the extra description for that project, it said replace with high level bridge. Well, needless to say, the public didn't believe us right from the beginning. And so it was a very painful lesson. And we got crucified a number of times during the public meetings because they just didn't trust us because of what we had put in the extra description from the work program, even though by law we were going to do the right thing. So I learned very early on that we need to understand the community's concerns and then help them to identify solutions. Next slide. So when I moved to District 1 as the secretary and was fortunate to lead the safety initiative and the Complete Streets implementation while I was there, we had a intersection called Martin Luther King Boulevard and 15th Street in one of our MPOs. And we had taken the approach that we're going to do a public meeting in this community which would have been directly affected by the intersection. And our project manager at the time ran a video at the workshop. And then when the public session started, things did not go very well. So he came to me and asked me to give him assistance with that effort. So next slide. So he and I talked through how to handle this. And so part of what I explained to him is that, running a video just doesn't get it. You've got to get in front of the public and address their concerns and their understanding about what the options are for the location, whether it's intersection or whatever it might be. So we put together a slideshow, and one example that we included in there, because there were a lot of people in Southwest Florida who came from the Northeast and their only experience was with traffic circles. And so we had to explain to them the difference between a modern roundabout and a traffic circle. And you can see here in Kingston, New York, that a modern roundabout is actually being retrofit in the center of a traffic circle, and all of that roadway network goes away once that's done. Next slide, please. So this is the test, and unfortunately you can't answer the questions, but we're going to give you a little bit of an education that we used at that next presentation. Next. So how many of you take a different route each time you leave your home to go to work? And so when we asked this question generally no one, literally no one would raise their hand. Next. If you were to approach a one-way street where cars are traveling from right to left, how would you decide to move into the road? And finally, some brave soul will raise their hand and say, well, I'd look to the left, and if no one was coming, then I would go. Next. Now that you know how to drive a modern roundabout, how many times would you have to drive through it to be comfortable? And people would sheepishly say, 2 times, maybe 3 times. Next. So what is the biggest problem with modern roundabouts? And of course, all different people have different points of views. My experience with modern roundabouts is the biggest problem that we have. People who will not stop at stop signs will stop at yield signs. And so people get frustrated when people stop at a yield sign and there's no one in the modern roundabout. So that was, again, part of what we put into the slideshow. Next slide. And then we got a lot of feedback about the problem. Well, this is all well and good. We understand we're bought into this now, but what about older users? So it just so happened that the Villages, which is just northwest of the city of Orlando, has a development called the Villages, and the median age is in the middle 70s. So half of those folks are above 70s and half of them are below 70s, but it's age restricted to 55. This is a private development. The private developer has built over 30 two-lane modern roundabouts. Obviously, they would not continue doing that if there were issues with the older users. Next. So education is critical when you're doing public outreach, and I won't read these slides since we've already talked about this. But again, this was all used to explain to the public how to operate in a modern roundabout, whether it's a single lane roundabout or a 2-lane roundabout. Next slide. And then the safety benefits. We have a large percentage, you heard David earlier say that a large percentage of our crashes, which result in fatalities and serious injuries, occur at intersections. Well, modern roundabouts provide a 90% reduction in fatalities and about a 75% reduction in serious injuries. They're more efficient in that there's less delay. You don't have to stop if there's no one at the intersection with a modern roundabout, whereas with a signal, you have to stop whether the intersection is empty or not. And then they're cost effective in that there's very little operations cost once they're built. Next slide. Just some illustrations. Again, this was all used as part of the slideshow, showing the number of conflict points between 2 vehicles arriving at an intersection. You can see 8 versus 32. Next slide. Between pedestrians and motorists, 8 conflicts versus 16 conflicts. And one of the real benefits is not only do you reduce conflicts, but you also reduce severity, because the speed that people can safely operate in a modern roundabout is in the range of 15 to 20 miles an hour. Next slide. In addition, it's one of the proven countermeasures for safety identified by Federal Highway, and that's because of the data, because of the statistics that you saw earlier. Yes, again, data is important to these conversations. Next slide. And then there's educational tools that Florida DOT has provided that are available to anybody who is trying to educate the public on how to use a modern roundabout. In addition, they have videos and PSAs. Next slide. So once the project manager went back and tried his second public workshop, when he got done, the public completely embraced that project, and it was moving forward as I left District 1. Next slide. Finishing it up, one thing that I did want to say, we continued using this approach more aggressively throughout the district. A good example is the Florida Avenue Master Plan in the city of Lakeland. The city wanted to improve safety on Florida Ave. The neighbors wanted safety and walkability in their neighborhood. So what I did is we set up a project with the Regional Planning Council to do a Florida Avenue Master Plan. And we took a dramatic different approach to that project. The locals drove the vision for the corridor, And consequently, the project ended up being very successful. The community wanted the 5-lane section reduced to a 3-lane section, increasing sidewalks and ultimately reducing speed as well. And so with that, I'm going to introduce our next 3 panelists. If each of you would say a few words about the work you're doing to engage constituents and raise awareness of the importance of making changes for safety, and if you would also keep your time to 5 minutes. First is Mary Lou Whaley, Director of Community Engagement and Philanthropy at Hillsborough County Public Schools. Then Ashley Bowman, Director of Marketing and Communications with the City of Tampa. And then Leona Lopez, Chief Communications Administrator with the Hillsborough County Government. Thank you. Mary Lou. We can't hear you. You're muted.
There we go. Are we better? Thank you, Mr. Hadaway. Appreciate it. On behalf of our superintendent, Addison Davis, and our school board, it's a pleasure to take part in the summit, Vision Zero, and our Safe Routes for School work that we accomplish in the district as a result of our partnership. It really is about engaging in education, as we've heard many, many times before, and the partnerships that happen as a result. You know, a couple of things, if we wanted to identify, you know, some of our campaigns or the ways that we engage activities, behaviors for change, is including kids, and it's starting with early education options, and it's really holding parents accountable to our kids that steward safety practices. So when you start early enough, kids kind of keep you honest, and they'll remind you of the role of the rules and regulations regarding pedestrian safety or bicycle safety. We're fortunate to encourage. This October, obviously, was Walk to School Day, and we push out opportunities for kids to really understand what that means and how to be safe while doing so. But again, I can't stress more that it's about partnership. It's about engaging our students in the process, including our high schoolers and new drivers, and bringing their voices to light in terms of how they'd like to share the information with their families and communities.
Thank you.
All right.
Mary Lou.
Thank you.
If you're complete, go ahead.
Okay, good morning. As mentioned, I'm Leona Lopez, and I serve as the Chief Communications Administrator for Hillsborough County. I'd like to take just a second to thank the MPO for providing me the opportunity to participate today, and I'm pleased to be here to share some high-level information on Hillsborough County's public communications efforts in support of our team as they seek to implement Vision Zero safety efforts. As you may be aware, Hillsborough County's Board of County Commissioners formally passed a resolution to support Vision Zero in 2017. This action by the board now helps to guide our efforts as we work to enhance the safety of county roads in this community. Our engineers approach each project through the lens of safety. It's at the core of all of their work. And Vision Zero now specifically impacts how county roads are planned, designed, and operated. As the county engineers work to make roads safer, incorporating Vision Zero principles every step of the way, we as communicators must work to educate and engage the public we serve by providing timely, accurate, and reliable information, while also delivering these important messages in a creative and really engaging way. This is critically important because at the end of the day, planning, design, engineering are only part of the solution. You've also heard about enforcement, which plays an important role. And in my experience, public education is also key. Without it, quite frankly, Vision Zero fails. Our most important partners are improving safety on our roadways are the motorists, bicycles, and pedestrians using these roads each and every day. Speed limits, intersection enhancements, painted sidewalks, lighting upgrades, these only work if each of us are using the roadway as intended, obeying the rules of the road, putting our phones down, and paying attention to our surroundings. Whether a motorist, bicyclist, pedestrian, planner, engineer, law enforcement officer, or communicator, We all play a role that directly contributes to the safety of our roads in this community. As communicators, we use many tools and tactics to help educate and inform our residents. At the county, some of these tools and tactics include our website, hcflgov.net, that includes an online digital newsroom full of engaging stories, posts on our social media platforms, crafting electronic newsletters and informational emails, conducting community meetings, producing quality videos and PSAs, and working with traditional news media to realize placements in local papers, radio, and TV stations. In fact, our online digital newsroom hosted on our site is an incredible tool to help us reach our communications goals and outreach efforts. We use this online content in conjunction with our social media platforms to garner impactful results. Over the last year, we have published a number of stories online related to the county safety efforts that align to Vision Zero. We have focused many of these stories and articles on road safety improvement projects, innovative research, planning, and design, and other applications that help demonstrate that the county's current practices toward Vision Zero. We seek out specific examples of work being done that will ultimately improve or enhance overall safety, and we share that work with our residents. This content is publicly available on the county's website and traditionally posted on the county's social media platforms. We also use and repurpose this content in the development of campaigns and supportive collateral materials that engage residents and help to raise the awareness of safety improvement efforts. Over the last year, we've highlighted crossing guard programs, traffic flow improvement projects, the addition of safety features on specific roadways, bike lane efforts, and a number of other initiatives that help drive the conversation, educate the public, and spotlight safety. We have also refocused attention on our media relations efforts and outreach, which includes the traditional pitching and placement of stories with local news outlets and publications. All of our storytelling with the media emphasizes safety and the Vision Zero philosophy, not only when we choose to initiate and actually pitch that story about our upcoming projects, but also when we answer questions brought to us by the press regarding existing infrastructure. Because road safety and pedestrian safety is of universal interest to residents, our local news media are really interested in stories about how Hillsborough is improving safety and addressing the concerns of residents. Our media relations team members work with the subject matter experts in public works to fully understand the scope and timeline of each project, as well as the potential safety impact, to include and answer why it matters, why it's important, and we craft messages for our residents that demonstrate that importance. We always seek to answer how a project or improvement truly impacts safety and why residents should actually care. How does it improve their life, their experience? Our goal is to educate and inform the public in every corner of the county about every stage of a project through completion. And we recognize that without doing our part as communicators to contribute and amplify the Vision Zero principles, we won't be successful. And frankly, working with our partners and agencies and ensuring we are amplifying similar messaging surrounding Vision Zero, we can better reach our target audiences, better reach our residents, and hopefully lead to real sustainable safety on our roadways. We know we definitely can't do it alone. We're only one part of the equation, and it will take all of us working together, all of our partners, all of the agencies to make sure safety is first. And with that statement, I conclude my remarks and I stand by for questions.
Thank you, Mary Lou and Leanna, for sharing with us what the county is doing to improve safety and and communication to the public to engage them in these efforts. So now we want to hear from Ashley with the City of Tampa.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ashley Baumann, and I'm the Director of Marketing and Communications with the City of Tampa and for Mayor Jane Castor. When Mayor Jane Castor took office May 1st of last year, she made a commitment to Vision Zero. In November, we launched our very first Crosswalks to Classrooms, which is a mural that's painted outside multiple elementary schools throughout the City of Tampa. And we remain committed to reaching a goal of 100% of those elementary schools that fall within the city. And not only is that commitment with Crosswalks to Classrooms in collaboration with Jacobs Engineering something that we will continue on, we're also providing books to these schools. That vision is book spines in those crosswalks, and those are books that the kids chose as part of a project to make sure that we're communicating with them. If we start with education at a young age, they'll remain committed to also educating their family and their parents with that Vision Zero lens. Beyond that, as you've seen throughout COVID, we've created a multifaceted street mural program. You know, it doesn't always go as planned, but the ones that we've remained committed to, we feel calm the traffic and really inspire a vision of artistic commitment from Mayor Castor. As mentioned before earlier in the call, Ashley received some paint on their bulb outs, and that it also creates a promenade and an entryway into downtown Tampa that we didn't have before. I encourage everyone on this call to take a drive down it. The colors are beautiful, vibrant, and riveting. We also are committed to an open streets program. I know that there's calls from everyone here listening today to shut down Bayshore, maybe once a month, maybe once a year. We remain committed to, by the end of the year, doing multiple open streets events. So look out for that. Not only did we do a bunch with open streets, but we're also committed to working with On Bikes to provide bicycles to underprivileged youth. I don't know if everybody on this call remembers, but last year around the holidays, we did caroling with Castor, where On Bikes brought out their float, and we went from neighborhood to neighborhood, traversed the city of Tampa, and most like a motorcade operation, and delivered bikes to kids right before Christmas. It was awesome, and we plan to do that again this year. Right now, that's all I have because Liana took the whole communications component, and we all operate in a very similar capacity, so I don't want to just restate what she already stated.
Thank you, Ashley. Well, I'm going to give you a little more time. I've got questions for each of you. Again, keep your time down as best possible. So for Ashley, so how do we recruit champions for safe streets so that we get the community more engaged in the efforts, and it's not just something the city or the county is doing to the locals?
I believe that it starts with leadership, and we lead from the top with Mayor Castor, but then we start at the grassroots level too. We go down and work with our multi-agency partners, again, back out to the Hillsborough County schools to teach at a young age this Vision Zero commitment. And we all learned, look both ways, but now it's more than that. It's continuing to educate up in an upward way.
Perfect. So for Mary Lou, how do we create a culture shift to embrace walking and bicycling to school?
Right. It really is a matter of educating. We keep talking about the importance of education, and it's providing opportunities for kids. You know, so speaking to what the mayor has done in providing bicycles, partnering to provide opportunities for kids that they wouldn't normally have. And I think it starts with just saying yes to the possibilities. It's saying yes to work with groups to bring about opportunities for our kids and our families. We have over 200,000 kids in our communities, and to speak to not only the health benefits of walking and being mobile, right, or being healthy and walking and riding bikes, but it's saying yes to the opportunities of engaging with kids. Let kids develop the messaging around it as well, and I think that's critical for buy-in. We've had some really tremendous opportunities for kids to share their brochures that they create, their messaging that they create, their TikToks that they enjoy sharing on social media. I know the Girl Scouts and Scouts take a great interest in pedestrian and bicycle safety. You know, not all streets are created equal, but within the communities that they serve, they find the opportunities to start the walking school buses. So, sidewalks, stompers, so it's just a matter of looking and surveying the opportunity, partnering with those agencies that say yes, and providing those resources to our families. And it's really about being together and agreeing to work together in a very kind of proactive, innovative way.
Great, thank you so much, Mary Lou. And now, Liana, I've got one for you. So how do we turn the conversation from why are you doing this to us to how soon can you finish?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So Hillsborough County's approach to all projects is to engage the community and our neighborhoods. We do that from the initial planning phase through construction. We truly want to know and understand the details of the project, and we want our residents to know that every step of the way. County Communications and Digital Media now works with Public Works and Neighborhood Relations on almost every project that takes place in this county. While we seek to keep the impacted community informed on the upcoming project, we also try and establish and maintain a two-way dialogue with residents about the impacts and benefits that the project will have in their neighborhood. So by fostering this relationship and providing the opportunity to offer input early in the project life cycle, community associates a sense of ownership of the project, which typically leads to a more positive sentiment in general. Kind of what you spoke to as well. Bring them in on the front end, help them be part of the solution. And so to help build this relationship and the two-way exchange, we've expanded the role of neighborhood relations over the last 2 years. The county's neighborhood liaisons work in the 4 county commission districts to help residents stay informed and up to date on projects in their area. Additionally, as we adapt our operations and outreach efforts in response to the pandemic, we've launched the Hillsborough County Engagement Hub. And the Hub is an online platform to help keep the community engaged and informed about various topics and projects that impact the community. You can find it by visiting, if I didn't give a plug, I wouldn't be doing my job, hcflgov.net/HCEngage. We'll soon use this online platform to facilitate public meetings for projects. It should help alleviate the need for in-person meetings, provide longer engagement window, and allow residents to provide input at their convenience. So for instance, we launched a project yesterday. It is a water resources project, but we'll use the same platform for all of our public works, transportation, and mobility projects. And so as we activate this platform, we anticipate that the dialogue will be more insightful as a result, because we'll be able to reach a larger audience and get a greater representative sample, I guess, for all of our projects participants. So hopefully having a 2-week time frame on these projects will allow residents to be able to engage instead of attending community meetings that might have just happened previously one night a week for a 3-hour time frame, and they couldn't make it because they had to work late that day or the kids had soccer. So this gives them 24/7, 2-week time frame to be able to comment, learn about a project, respond, and provide their input that we'll use. So at the end of the day, people want to know what's going on. They want to know that we're listening, and it's our job to ensure that we're open, honest, and transparent. So if we do this, we kind of organically shift the conversation and create a sense of partnership towards success. So I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, ladies, and great job. And before I turn the mic back over to Commissioner Kemp, I want to issue a challenge that I've been doing for 5 years at all the presentations I've made. And unfortunately, we can't survey, but I can assure you the response would be the same here. And my questioning in every presentation I've made, 90 to 95% of the people in the audience have not looked at the driver's handbook since they got their learner's permit. So I suggest you go online, pull down the driver's handbook, and read the handbook so that you'll have a better understanding of the laws. It's something we all need to do to help improve on the education aspects. Commissioner Kemp, we've got some time for questions. It's back in your hands.
Thank you so much. Very much appreciate Mr. Hadaway, you for being a part of this, and I'm very happy to hear from you. Also, Mary Lou Whaley, Director of Community Engagement and Philanthropy, Hillsborough County Schools, Ashley Bauman, Director of Marketing and Communications with the City of Tampa, and Leanna Lopez, Chief Communications Administrator, Hillsborough County Government. We're going to move now to the next part, which is simply to wrap up an observations, but I'm gonna, we still apparently have those from our first workshop online, several, and we had some questions that, because that went on a little bit over, never got asked to the panelists there. And so I'd like to just, because I think that would be a great way to kick off some of this discussion, but so we'd like to start with those questions that were prepared, and this is so this again are for Lucia Garces, for Mike Callahan, and Melissa Zornito, all part of our first panel. Really important questions, and for Ms. Garcia, during development reviews, vehicular impacts tend to be emphasized. How can other modes be included, such as when pedestrian generators are across a roadway from a new residential development, or pedestrian generators, that's a bureaucratic language, but let's say when pedestrians need to cross a roadway from a new residential development, how do we avoid making decisions now that require costly fixes later? If you're there, Lucia?
I am, Commissioner, and thank you for that question. Happy to answer that. I think what's been really interesting about this entire session, it's incredibly thought-provoking and really moving us off of that platform of volume to capacity and level of service. I think, as Ian mentioned in the very beginning, you know, even our mobility fee program is all based on vehicular capacity. So the ability to really move us in a different direction and address how developers can help in doing that is an important piece of this. And I'd like to just say that in our current development review process, sidewalks are a major component of any residential development as well as a commercial development. What I think is really interesting about that question, though, is it begins to introduce a different perspective that isn't just a site-specific. It is, what do you do in the broader context of walkability, not just alongside a development, but across a street, across a roadway. And in order, you know, the question of what do you do to prevent future retrofits, I believe that that concept that was introduced earlier on of context classification, and then everything else that starts to funnel from that, the ladder that gets set to corridor preservation, and then our access management and land development code, is a critical piece. And what is great about the timing to do that is we are doing this as the transportation element and the land use element in the comprehensive plan are being updated right now. So it gives us the opportunity to look at all of those pieces together and understand that traffic doesn't just, pedestrians don't just walk along one side of a sidewalk, and adding a sidewalk is good, but across is really an important piece. And if we understand what kind of roadway someone is crossing, it helps us understand how those design principles and then the engineering implementation comes into effect. So that was the long answer. The short answer is really understanding the broader context of roadways, understanding how they build communities, how they don't build communities, how roadways can be bisectors. Parenthetically, the interstate system is the best example of what that did to communities. So understanding how the dynamics work from a truly knitting together of the roadway corridor and the land uses and the community around it. And that would go through not just for developer, but also for the way the local governments are building their roads as well. And to quote Dr. Holt, and with that, I'll stop.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Kemp, you're muted.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, not sure why that happens, but it shows me unmuted. At any rate, how can we, this is for Mike Callahan of the City of Tampa. There you are. How can we, the question is, how can we create relationships with developers to leverage investments to improve safety? No, we can't hear you.
Mr. Callahan, you're set to phone audio, and you need to enter an audio pin for your phone to work, or else you have to go back to computer audio. Again, Mr. Callahan, you need to either return to computer audio, or there you go. There you go. Now you can speak.
Thank you. I'm so sorry I got disconnected earlier. I apologize. So, Commissioner, thank you. That's it's a good question, actually. I thought long and hard about this. There's really kind of two approaches. One is the strong arm approach, which is just mandated in our land development code. Sidewalks are required without exceptions in our communities. In the city of Tampa, new residential is not required to install a sidewalk if there are currently none on that block base. That needs to change, and that's been going on for a little bit too long. We need to change that in our land development code and mandate that sidewalks happen. The other is creating new fees to pay for crosswalks and signals. But I really think there's a better approach. There's a softer approach that would encourage developers by providing, I think maybe let's talk about having developer forums led by a city point person. We're going to hire a new Vision Zero coordinator, I think, in the next, in the not too distant future. I don't know how quickly that's happening, but I know they're out right now for advertisement for that position. But in that forum, we can also talk about fast tracking developers' permits. We can offer bonus provisions through more entitlements, whether it's density or intensity. Even something like allowing accessory dwelling units, which there's only 2 places in the city of Tampa right now that would allow that, and one is in Seminole Heights by right, Seminole Heights, and also in the CBD. So I think that needs to really happen more universally across the city. And then, let's start small. We don't need to just go crazy across the city. Let's start, maybe we can start in the CRAs or just in the overlay districts. But, I think this developer forum would be probably a good way to go. So.
Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Callahan.
You're welcome.
And finally, I'll go to Melissa Zornita. And Melissa, you're there.
Hi.
Hello. We know that providing an interconnected network with more smaller streets tends to be safer than large multi-lane arterials with cul-de-sac subdivisions and to connect us in an easier way. So what do you think the challenges are to achieving this?
Thanks. That's a great question. And you can see over time as the community has developed from moving from the connected grid that you have within the city of Tampa to the development pattern that Lucia started to show from mid-century 1900s, moving to the cul-de-sacs and the suburban development pattern that then is more pervasive as you move further out from the central city. And that poses a lot of challenges, things that planners and engineers now realize aren't creating good connectivity. It's pushing a lot of the trips onto our major arteries. And oftentimes then the few connections that are there face a lot of cut through traffic demand. So in the comprehensive plan, we have pages of policies about having better connectivity, about creating more of a grid pattern. But there are a number of obstacles that we face in doing that. Some of them are things like environmental systems, particularly when we're looking in a more greenfield development pattern. There are a lot of important environmental assets that we have in our community, and that's a choice of priorities that we want to preserve many of those over creating the connection. I think that's something as our community starts to look at infill and redevelopment sites, we're going to have to look very carefully at those issues, because sometimes the isolated wetland may be the choice between preserving that and making the roadway or pedestrian connection. And that's going to be a difficult thing for our community to weigh. We have a lot of places where we have to retrofit existing problems, like the example that Ian Lockwood showed earlier, and that takes community buy-in and property owner buy-in and some dollars to invest the resources in making those connections, reconnecting streets. There are development and market obstacles. The tendency in our development community is to continue building what they know how to build and what they have the design templates to do. And we need to have, as Mike discussed, some conversation with them about how to create some different models that include the connectivity. We've had policies and even incentives in the comprehensive plan for creating traditional neighborhood development that has alleys and a grid pattern. And obviously we haven't made it attractive enough for the market to just make that choice on its own. So let's have a conversation about what it's going to take to get it there. Certainly there are some code obstacles, as Mike Callahan mentioned. You know, there are places where we still have some suburban standards in what is an urbanizing area. And so a time to look at those land development regulations and bring those up to date. And then probably the biggest thing that we face is neighborhood obstacles. I've worked at the Planning Commission for 19 years and have seen time and time again where we have one development with a stub out and the development has been built to connect. And then the next development comes in and wants to connect because we're telling them they need to, and all the neighbors in the existing development come out and oppose that connection because they're worried about the traffic coming through and their kids playing in the street. And all of that comes before the elected officials, and ultimately the connection doesn't get made. So, so education of our neighborhoods about how connections and having more of them can actually better disperse the traffic, can create a safer, slower speed perhaps on their streets. And then also having the political will to stand behind the policies that are in our plan and implement them when those tough, difficult choices are in front of our elected officials. So those are just kind of a few of the obstacles that we face in making those connections. And hopefully together we can have more of these conversations so that it becomes easier for our community to embrace them.
Thank you. The last one I would say is the biggest obstacle as a commissioner. I know I'm not sure where we go with resolving that, but well, I'm going to open it up to our other MPO board members that are online to give any closing statements or anything that they'd like to share about the summit today. Is there anyone that would care to speak at this point? Okay, I guess seeing none, is that correct, Beth?
Sure, we do still have several board members who are with us here at our summit. We've heard a lot of really interesting things today, I think. And so I just wanted to encourage anyone who would like to turn your cameras on, and or if you don't have your camera, just to speak up and share maybe anything new that you heard or learned today. For me, I didn't realize that guidance that Lucia shared with us from the Institute of Transportation Engineers from back in the 50s and 60s that really laid out the framework for why we do not have an interconnected street network and the opportunity to have more smaller streets that can have manageable traffic speeds and safe places for everybody to be able to get around. So that was a real insight for me.
I'll just say for me, I'm just every step, every leap, everywhere place we go, to go to a better built environment, one that creates walkable communities, a sense of place, creates a kind of place that people want to be and work and live in, is always a direction that I'd like to see us move in. And I feel like we got some ideas today about how to move that agenda forward, and of course about how to make it so that we're on the horrible side, that Florida is not #1 in the nation on pedestrian, bicycle, car crash deaths. Is certainly an ultimate goal, but I would really like to see us, as much as we can, start to return our built environment back to, and that goes back to, I think, Mr. Lockwood's presentation at the beginning, how we can really look at the built environment that we have now, that we have put there for decades, that's car-centric, and how we can move it to being a more people-centric place where people love being, and where we can protect people, save lives, and build a quality of life in Hillsborough County that's great for everyone. Yes, Commissioner Overman.
Thank you, and thanks to everyone for offering so much insight on how we got here. And I love the question to Ms. Garces that referenced pedestrian generators. I think our largest pedestrian generator challenge that we have right now are our schools, because it generates the greatest amount of pedestrian traffic when children are trying to get to schools, and cars are, are frequently sitting in a queuing line, and when you have that intersection, it doesn't go well. To drop kids off, and the school buses too. So it's a big issue when it comes to when the three of those items meet. But that's not the only circumstance. We also see that in our local grocery stores, shopping malls. Those are pedestrian generators too, if they're designed for pedestrian generation. Or if they're built on a road that is friendly to the neighborhood community on the other side of the arterial highway or collector road or whatever road that commercial development is in. And so I think that where the rubber literally meets the road is where our planning guidelines and design meet our technical manuals, because I think what I've learned in this process of trying to navigate the project approval process is, it's there where the planning we've been talking about is there, but it doesn't appear as though it's possible in our technical manual, or it isn't written in such a way that it isn't written out of a 1965, plan, which is what, Ms. Garces had referenced, is a lot of the community design specs for cul-de-sacs and those kinds of communities came out of the 60s, and we're in 2020 last I checked. That was a long time ago. And that those community designs are still in play now. So where we are doing the hard work of updating those technical manuals to include the actual technical specs for developers and road designers, and street designers and trail designers that can assist in facilitating that connectivity and improve the safety of where, cars meet people and people meet cars and bikes meet people and bikes meet cars. I think that's when we're able to get our technical manuals in line with our Vision Zero plans. We might be able to move the needle a little more forward, because as you heard earlier, with Ms. Cernita. She mentioned, you know, the neighborhood that's established pushbacks because they're concerned that they're going to have traffic suddenly, you know, go through their neighborhood because they know that will decrease their safety. But if we design communities with ultimate safety in mind, we might not get so much pushback. So, and I'll stop there.
Hi, Commissioner Kemp. I'd like to make a comment. It's Melanie Williams when it presents itself, please. I can't hear you. Are you on mute?
I am not on mute, but my computer keeps muting me. I maybe should take a message. Sorry, even though it shows that it's not on mute. But anyway, I don't know what that's about. But you're recognized, Ms. Williams. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just want to make a comment that, you know, I started on the call just when it came on, and just the presentations, the panels, they've been very, very informative. For me, you know, in the private industry as well as representing HART, it really brought several things together for me when we talked about the pedestrians, the communities, the walkability, as well as the police department and the interaction from an engagement standpoint with the crime. I think it's opened my eyes and has afforded me knowledge to be a better representative of our community and county and on behalf of HART as a result of this session. So I just wanted to call out the fact that Vision Zero, it definitely is something that this agenda and the folks that are Ian and all of the folks that spoke earlier were just phenomenal and have left me in a position that there's so much more that can be done, and recognizing that Commissioner Overman, we talked about, yes, it is 2020. I thought to myself when you asked that question, I think it's still 2020. Lots happened, but we have to find a way to make it work, to force the vantage point and the view based on this education that we've received today. And so I just wanted to say thank you, Commissioner Kemp and Beth, for the hosting of this call and the information that's provided. It's just been very, very beneficial. Thanks again.
Thank you so much, Ms. Williams. Thank you. And I guess with that, it looks like did you have another comment, Beth?
Yes, thank you so much. I actually wanted to share a question that came in from the audience, if that's all right. And this has to do with crosswalks, and crosswalks are such an important part of the equation. And it's, you know, it's one thing that we don't necessarily think about when we are updating our technical manuals. They're typically looking at what is the cross section of the road, and not how often is there a crosswalk available for somebody to get across it. So if you have to walk a half a mile to get to the next crosswalk, what are the chances that somebody is actually going to use a crosswalk to get from one side to the other? So crosswalk spacing so critically important on, you know, particularly where we have those pedestrian generators. So our question was actually about our state legislature possibly making it even more difficult to have those crosswalks in place. And so says, as many of you are aware, the recent passing of Sophia's law by the state legislature has caused many recent improvements to either be removed or retrofitted to full stop intersections. I don't think they actually passed it. I think they considered it. It appears that this proposal was a failure by our legislature to understand recent safety implementation efforts, like rapid flashing beacons, like Secretary Gwynn mentioned earlier. What can we do in the future to better inform our state lawmakers to look to the transportation planning and engineering community for guidance in these matters? I don't know if you have any suggestions or thoughts.
I'm not sure who is on to answer that.
Beth, this is Billy Hadaway. I will volunteer to explain myself there.
Thank you.
When I was at the city, I ended up going to the legislative session 3 years in a row to defend the use of red light cameras. And I think that by getting information that's short and to the point and data specific information and taking that, being willing to take that to legislative sessions, but even writing your representative and informing them about the benefits of rectangular rapid flashing beacons, I think will go a long way. The law in all 50 states is that pedestrians have to yield, or excuse me, motorists have to yield to pedestrians in a marked crosswalk. Unfortunately, our culture has tended to ignore that in Florida, not in every state. In many states, it works really well. We have made progress, I think, as a result of the Alert Today campaign, but we still have a long way to go. So reaching out to your legislature, if you go to the Alert Today Florida website, there's information on rectangular rapid flashing beacons that might help inform you in writing a letter to your representatives.
Can I follow up on that, Mr. Hadaway? Just,
of course.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned, and it definitely appears to be true that in Florida, we're not as, you know, I've seen states where everybody is, you know, stops, no matter where they are, their car stops when a pedestrian appears. And it does seem to be a very different culture here. So, you know, some of the things we talked about this morning are just letting people know about Vision Zero and educating people. But what do you, you know, what do we do to change that culture?
Gosh, I mean, the yielding behavior is primarily a function of speed. So reducing speeds in those areas where you have high pedestrian activity. Here at the city of Orlando, before I left, we were putting in more raised crosswalks, and they can be adjusted. It's not, again, just like any tool, it's not a one size fits all. So they can be adjusted for different speeds. But I think if we're going to make pedestrian safety a focus, then we have to be willing to require motorists to slow down even on some of our major arterials. And we were actually looking at putting in potentially some raised crosswalks on US 41 in the city of Sarasota, because there's limits to what you can do to get driver behavior to change. And many times it takes physical changes along with the education and then ultimately enforcement if you cannot solve it with those first two approaches.
Great, thank you so much. Dangerous by design in some part. Thank you so much. So it looks like there's no other discussion at this time. So thank you to everyone. Thank you for the workshop. Thank you to all the guests. Thank you for everyone who was involved in part of this. And we're gonna sign off and now with our 2020 Vision Zero Summit. And thank you all so much for being part of this.
Thank you.
I'll say bye too.